It's Tuesday, June 4th. I'm Adam Walsh, and this is The Signal. And it's a day when we seed between the lines, but we also fly by the seat of our plants. We don't moss around here because there's never a dill moment, because it's gardening day, a day where you herb your enthusiasm. Couldn't help myself. All right, folks, it is a gardening day here on The Signal every Tuesday during the grow season. Let me see. Happy Valley Goose Bay, 20 degrees and sunny. Labrador City, 20 degrees and sunny. Corner Brook, 17, mainly cloudy. Nain, 13, partly cloudy. St. John's. Dan Rubin, guest of mine. How are we doing in St. John's today?
Great day to be indoors. Great day to be indoors, I would say.
Great day to be indoors and planning your garden activity.
Oh, yeah, we could do that too. I mean, I have things started in the greenhouse, but boy, I'm itching to get outdoors and get things planted.
Yeah. And I mean, Father's Day is just around, go time is just around the corner.
Yeah. May 24th is past. I mean, what are we doing here?
Yeah, exactly. So, folks, this is Dan Rubin. You've all heard him before on this show and other parts of CBCNL. Dan's also the author of Sun, Seed, and Soil, Tips and Techniques for a Northern Garden. If you want to join the gardening discussion today, so if you've got questions for Dan, or if you just want to talk about how things are progressing in your garden so far this season, or for your plans, and if stuff's not working out too, we'd like to hear the whole range here on The Signal. Give us a call, 709-722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. The text line is open. For texts, 709-327-8206. Emails, thesignal@cbc.ca, and we also love your gardening pictures. So, if anywhere else in the province today, I'm sure you can take really good pictures. Today, it's more of a gardeners in the mist sort of day in St. John's metro area. But that being said, if you want to send us a foggy picture of tulips, by all means, thesignal@cbc.ca. How's the feedback been for your book? Because it's been out for a little bit now. How's it been going?
I haven't checked in lately with the publisher, but I think we're past 1,000 copies sold.
Cool.
And that feels good. But what's even better is the lovely feedback I've been getting from gardeners. And every time I sign a book in a bookstore, which I did a lot of before Christmas, I say, here's my email. The book comes with kind of a guarantee, which is when you have a puzzle or something you don't understand in the book or a garden question, you email me. So I've gotten a flow of comments from people who really like the book. I just feel very lucky to have created something that people are finding useful. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, run us through a couple of just some of the what's the range of advice that you give in the book there?
Well, the book is thick. It's right here. Yeah. I'll drop it. It's heavy. I was very pleased with the way that Boulder handled the illustrations. It's rich, thick with illustrations and charts and tables, lists of plants that do well in our climate. But it starts out with a view of the basics, sun, seed, and soil, good dirt, good protection against the weather, and for God's sake, plant the right plant. And then goes on through the garden year and then gets into tips and techniques. And finally, there's a section for every type of garden plant you might plant. I had to take the flowers out. They wouldn't fit. But I'm looking at the beginning of the chapter on herbs, for example. And I was very lucky to have photographs from Michael Brzezinski, the geologist and author who lives in Rocky Harbor, my good friend Sean Dawson, and Tim Walsh. So in that sense, in terms of the pictures, it was a collaborative work. And it's just a lot of how-to stuff for how the heck do you grow stuff in this cold, windy, wet place. Looking out the window, he said, oh, my God, the fog.
Yeah, it's quite, and I mean, earlier this morning, so again, St. John's area, it's we had that lightning and thunder earlier this morning, too, with the fog, which is always, it's like, okay, cool. Then some heavy rain at points. How do you, you mentioned you got stuff in the greenhouse waiting to go. So, A, what do you got waiting to go? And then how do you keep pushing through this type of a weather situation for the grow season?
Well, one of my main strategies, and I talk about this in the book as well, is starting seeds early. And so March or April, I already had seeds in sterilized potting soil under lights in my basement. Those same plants are being hardened off, which means that they're in the greenhouse where it's cooler but still protected. And then once they're ready to go out in the garden, they will still be, in some cases, under a plastic tent or tomato house or something. So the plants that I've started early include herbs like basil and not oregano. It just does fine through the winter, but tomatoes and peppers and squash and cucumbers and the things that need a head start, so that those plants are already maybe 6 to 9 inches tall. And they're in pots. They've been repotted once because I start them as thick as ever, and then I tease them out and repot them. And so that's a key strategy for gardening in this kind of climate. And where the weather is so unpredictable from year to year, I'm sure there's people nodding as they listen to the radio, like you never know what it's going to throw at you. You have to be kind of prepared for whatever comes. And that's why starting early is really good.
Yeah.
Because you cushion your plants by keeping them indoors a little longer when it's a June like this.
Yeah. My wife was asking, is this another January for St. John's? I was like, it's something like that.
But you did notice on that one hot day how hot it got. It wasn't, 52 degrees like it was during the election in India.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
But it was 27. And so that's what we're waiting for. And that's the virtue of having the plants ready to go. Once the warm weather comes, it will come, folks. Believe me, it will. We'll be ready to start some serious gardening here.
Yeah, and like I said just there at the beginning, right, I'm envious of folks around the province who are getting some of that great weather. Like I was talking to a colleague of mine, Andrea McGuire, producer in Happy Valley Goose Bay, at the morning meeting this morning, and Andrew was just talking about how great the weather is there, and I was just kind of like, oh, yes, enjoy it because it's if you're getting it, soak it all up, and hopefully your grow season's going well.
Well, two things to say. One is that Labrador, we don't maybe realize this down here on the island, but Labrador is it's a really great place to grow food. Not only does it have more sunny days, it has really gorgeous soil, and it also has an advantage of the cool weather that makes for the best tasting vegetables. And that was confirmed by a man who was the base commander at Goose Bay during the Second World War. He said, these are the best vegetables I've seen.
Really?
Anywhere.
Even with some of the sand that you get in around the Lake Melville area, it's still pretty good,
Oh,
hey?
yeah, because that's old ocean bottom.
Oh, there you
the
go.
nutrients are there. And I want to say something to those of you who listen to me say start your plants early and they go, well, I didn't. I want to tell you that this weekend, this Saturday, there will be a triple plant sale. There will be 3 sites up on Mount Scio, the Botanical Garden, the Autism Society on Clinch Crescent, across from the Health Sciences, and the Mercy Center at 101 Mount Scio Road, where we'll be having plants for folks.
Wow.
And that'll include some maple trees, some aloe plants, vegetables, herbs. We've all been starting them. So if you need plants, there's a plant sale in 3 places at once, Saturday morning, and that's the Autism Society, the Munn Botanical Garden, and the Mercy Center.
Yeah, it's great to have the selection and the availability, right, for folks who are kind of either really into it or some who are just thinking, hey, maybe this is the season to slowly kind of get going into a growing frame of mind. Why is it that we talk about Father's Day and I mentioned Father's Day is coming and it's go time for planting? So why is that?
It's just the time of the year. It's when summer should be here.
Yeah, and
should be here. And it's the time when things go out in the ground and start growing for real. And because we're in the northern part of the world, we get these long summer days. And it's just the ideal time to get out in the garden.
Yeah, and typically they think should be okay when it comes to frost. Typically.
Yeah, there's a kind of a mythology of fear around frost that people need to get over. Even lettuces in a frost will go limp and then recover.
Nice.
But the key is that when you plant things out in your garden, you need to create protective structures.
Yeah.
Everything from a fence to break the wind, to a plant or a building provide a wind shadow, to cloches, which are boxes with clear covers. There's all kinds of ways we can use recycled materials. I'm big on recycling materials to create garden structures, raised beds, various kinds of things.
Yeah, exactly. Then that makes it fine. You don't have to worry about it as much, right? Because, like you said, you got them protected. Like you've got the structures in place.
Well, the proof of the pudding is this. I have boxes on 3-foot by 7-foot garden beds that have a second box on top. And when I put a hinged lid made of clear plastic, framed in wood, on that box, I can plant in October and harvest in February. I can go out and sweep the snow aside, raise the lid, and there's my lettuce and my arugula. And things that need warmth, like tomatoes and peppers, they won't do that. But cold-tolerant greens, lettuce, arugula, bok choy, spinach, kale, will grow right through the winter. You can be harvesting salad right up until the spring comes.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Right. Just, I find it neat, like, to push that on, like, to have the understanding around that, and then to be able to kind of, like, like folks used to say, well, no, you can't. But so actually, the envelope can be pushed. We can do this type of stuff. It's just about thinking about looking at the reality of it and planning for it.
And then there's perennials, and then there's the fruit. I had, 65 pounds of plums from 2 trees last year. The birds got all the darn cherries, but I've got cherry trees and sour cherries and plums and apples and pears and gooseberries and kiwis and grapes outdoors. But they need a little tiny bit of shelter from wind and cold. Not much.
It is gardening day here on The Signal. My guest is Dan Rubin, author of Sun, Seed, and Soil, Tips and Techniques for a Northern Garden. If you want to join the conversation, the numbers to call 709-722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. If you want to text us questions or garden updates, the text line is 709-327-8206, or you can email us thesignal@cbc.ca. So we've talked about your book. We're mentioning some of the sales that are going around. The other thing we tend to talk about is just what you've been doing with the Food Producers Forum, and like also there's a thought to Labrador with some of the food security work. I was just wondering if you could touch on some of this stuff.
It's pretty darned amazing what's going on out there, folks. The project that I lead, which is called the Provincial Food Network, came out of our survey that we did in the fall of 2022. And the conference that we organized, the provincial conference in May of that year. And we have 14 sites, including Indigenous communities, the Newfoundland Council in Labrador, community gardens, and family farms. And at 3 of these sites, we're right now building earth-sheltered passive solar greenhouses.
Wow.
And each of these greenhouses will have tubes under the ground to store heat in the soil, called a ground air heat transfer, or GAT system. And I recently, just a couple of weeks ago, came back from Labrador, where we're working in partnership with Roxanne Notley, the food person for the Nunavut Council. And we were in Mary's Harbour, Labrador, where the town is also co-sponsoring a greenhouse. And in about 4 days, we got a hole dug, pipes laid, drainage established, soil covered over, foundation built for a 14 by 24 greenhouse. And that greenhouse, with the support that we're getting from Nunavut, will produce food all year round. And it'll be an educational center for a small town on the Labrador coast. So to see that going on and the other initiatives happening in Labrador through the groups that we work with there is darned exciting, because things are changing. Another story I could tell is that on our way back from Mary's Harbour, once we crossed over on the ferry, we went down to Rocky Harbour and stayed overnight. And right over the hill is Norris Point. And in Norris Point, a couple named Laurie Haycock and Boyd Maynard had been farming for about 5 years. Now, they told me that they didn't mean to be farmers when they moved there from Ontario. They just wanted to retire. But sure enough, there was too much food coming out of their backyard. So now they have 60 acres of crown land. And through the project the Provincial Food Network, we were able to raise almost $400,000, about half of which is going to the sites. So in the case of Grossmorn Farm and Market in Norris Point for Laurie and Boyd, we were able to help them buy what's called a walk-behind tractor, kind of a glorified rototiller with attachments. Yeah. So I said to her, Laurie, so how has that helped you? She said, well, it used to take us 3.5 days to prepare the ground in our high tunnel greenhouse for planting. With the machine, it took 15 minutes.
That's really good.
And that's one of the first pieces of evidence that I can say we're not hot air. We're actually making a difference. I said to her when we were out in their fields, I said, so how will this change your production this year? She said, it'll increase it by at least 50%. We're hoping it will double it.
Wow.
And this is acres of vegetables.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
We've got a couple folks on the lines, and if you want to join the conversation with Dan Rubin here and myself for Gardening Day on this signal, you can call us 709-722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. The text line is open, 709-327-8206. Emails, thesignal@cbc.ca. Ron's on the line from St. John's. How you doing?
Good. How are you, Adam?
Not too bad, just mucking through the weather and hoping for some sun. But hey, like things could be worse, and it's all good.
That's right. Could be bombs landing in your backyard, or
yeah, there's always something. Things could always be a lot worse. So
that's right. It's all about context.
Exactly. How's gardening for you? Questions or updates?
I had a question for Dan. I just heard him talk about his plum, the yield from his plum trees.
Yeah.
And I have a whole load of plum trees, but they all I had to cut them all down because they all got black knot. And I was looking for one that's resistant to black knot, and I couldn't find one locally, so I was looking online, and there's some, but I don't think they're actually. I don't know if they're resistant to black knot or not. I don't know
it's kind of tough finding ones that are. We have the Italian prune plums, the 2 trees that I planted, one about 5 years ago, one about 7 years ago, and they do get the black knot. So what I do is I take shears or cutters and I cut the branches out, and I get rid of it every year, and I trim it back and I eliminate it that way. And with that, I have trees that are producing really well, but you have to be very persistent about it and just take out the branches that have any sign of that black stuff.
I was really monitoring it closely, and then last year I didn't get out to my house for a couple of weeks, and then it was a really damp spring.
Yes.
It was like we had something like this weather, and it just proliferated, and the whole trees were all just couldn't manage it at all.
That's really tough, especially because trees take a bit of work, not like growing tomatoes or peppers, but you do put them in the ground. It's a bit of work. You buy them, you fertilize them, and then when you see that happen, because those are fungal spores, and some people talk about cutting the branches and burning them. I would advise you never to do that, because unless it's in the heart of the fire, the spores that are released can spread to other trees. But we have them in our native plums and our pin cherries, so the plum trees are vulnerable. I have found some success with just cutting it out, but the battle never ends, to be honest.
Yeah. There was one variety is called AUO Rosa. I don't know.
Yeah. I haven't heard of that particular one, but I know that there are efforts being made to find some resistance to the black knot. You might be lucky if you get one. What I would generally tell people about fruit trees, don't buy a multi-grafted type because they're not reliable, they don't hold up. In general, although I've had some exception to this, don't buy from a big box store or somewhere like that. Go to the good sources, which are Pat's Plants, Murray's, Holland Nursery, Lester's, places that really know plants. If you really want solid advice, find Evan Murray at Murray's Garden Center, because he really knows. What you're looking for is trees that are very well adapted to our climate. But if there are resistant varieties, the people at those places, like Pat Puddester and Evan Murray, they would be the ones to go to for advice. I wish I knew more.
Great. Thanks for that, Dan.
Hey, good to talk to you.
Thanks for the call, Ron. All right. Before we go back to the phone, so again, Dan Rubin is my guest, author of Sun, Seed, and Soil, Tips and Techniques for a Northern Garden. The numbers to call, 709-722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. We've got a couple people in the queue, but we'll just continue to put the number out if you want to join the conversation. The text line, and we just had a text come in, 709-327-8206. Emails thesignal@cbc.ca. Just briefly look at the text line. Ooh, Happy Valley Goose Bay today. Sunny, 26 degrees now. Apple trees about to blossom. Potatoes emerged and rhubarb doing great. Just emailed you some photos. Also text them. So that's from friend of the show, Tony Chubbs. And here, Dan, check these out. Right? So,
I was talking to Tom Angiers earlier today and said, "What's it like up there?" And he said, "Well, we're out and we're planting."
Look at all that rhubarb. Oh, that looks great. And then the blossoms too coming out. So there you go. Loving the pictures and info from and the weather update, Tony from Happy Valley Goose Bay. Enjoy the day, and if you're out and about, obviously for folks, if you're not listening to the show because you're in the fields, congratulations, because that's amazing.
Another tip for gardeners generally is to find perennials, plants that will survive the winter here. Herbs will, fruit trees will, rhubarb will, and between those perennials and the plants that people for some reason call weeds that are edible and delicious, like nettles, which people tend to hate because they sting. There are plants that can go right through the year in your garden, come up in the spring. We're already harvesting the walking onions in March.
Right.
So if you shift toward the perennial side, that's a winning strategy.
That's a great tip. Let's go to, we've got Bob on the line from South River. Hi.
Hello.
How you doing?
Hey, Bob.
Not too bad. Hey, Dan. I have a comment, and then I'm looking at two rabbits now chasing each other, which are waiting to get at my legs when it comes.
Oh, you got a salad bar for them, do you?
Oh, we have so many rabbits.
Oh, boy.
Anyway, I just want to say, Dan, I bought your book. Loved the book. It's like a coffee table. I'm so open over there now. I'm always poking at it.
Oh, that's great. I love that approach that you poke at it. Yeah.
And I got a copy from my stepdaughter as well. And so good book. I like it. I have a question about onions. So for the last several years, and this is the third year here now with this garden, and we're in South River, and I'm going to say our weather is so much better than where you guys are too. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
We're in the bottom of the bay. We're not in the. I always said it should be called not Conception Bay North, but Conception Bay Middle, right here. Carbonear is Conception Bay North. But I've been buying, so I've been putting in onion sets, right? And when I look at the bag, I buy them, and and I said to the guys that, I want the globe onions, right? That kind of thing. So first ones I bought, put them in, looking at the onions growing, so, oh, Jesus, I have great onions. And I did, but when I plucked them, they were flat on the bottom. It's like, what? Where did Jesus the rest of the onion? Anyway.
Huh.
So then the next year, I bought another firm down here locally in Bay Roberts, and the guy said, no, they're the ones everybody put in. So I put them in again, and pretty well the same thing happened. Yet when you get them at the store, they're kind of a globe onion. Here's my question.
Yeah.
So I went to Gate Seed, and I bought a couple more bags of yellow onion. Yeah. And I also bought a Spanish yellow onion, which I know, shelf life not as long. Like, for instance, I get lots of onions last year. We have about 25 pounds of them left from last year, so it's great. But there were a lot of small ones. So, one more thing. Last year, I put them in. I had over 200. I think I might have had them too close, because at one point they just fell over. And it wasn't at the end of the season, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they just sort of fell over, and they continued to grow. So I'm wondering, you have any tip on the right kind of onion? And maybe, I know this year I'm reading and I'm going to be giving them a high nitrogen every 3 weeks or so, it tells me. And I want your feedback on everything I just said.
Wow, that's a lot to think about. So the onion sets, and I have planted my onion sets as well, both yellow ones and red ones. Though that's an imported product. There may be some produced in Ontario. I'm not sure about it. So what you're planting is an immature onion. But as you know, every plant you grow is of a certain variety. And so basically the results that you're getting, you talk about your flat bottoms, comes from the type of onion that you're planting. And so unless you can find a source, you might have a better, rounder onion with the Spanish onions. You're right that they don't store quite as well. But from what you've told me about your storing, you're doing really well. And that may also have to do with the climate, the microclimate in the area that you're in. Because being at the bottom of a valley, is that how you describe your place?
I am, but I'm actually on a ridge. I'm basically behind.
Oh, you're on a ridge, yeah.
Ridge, right?
But to the extent that you're sheltered there, or that it's a bit warmer, you're better off both in the growing, because they need the warmth for growth, and certainly in the curing. So when you harvest your onions, do you put them out in the sun to cure before you bag them up or whatever?
I actually did leave them out for a bit, but basically I brought them into my garage, and I put them on I put them down through shelving, so the bulbs were up, and I certainly let them dry well for over a week. When I did store them in mesh bags, I leave them in my garage. I've been telling my brother-in-laws and stuff, you don't need to be chopping them up. If you have them in a cool place, they're fine.
Cool, dry. Fine. It's not quite a root cellar, but it meets the requirements for good storage. But drying them out properly for onions and garlic is the key. I would call that curing, and that's what you did. And I've made a rack out of recycled wood, where I can thread the greens down through them and hang them like upside down. And I hang that. That's what I do. I hang that in my shed, and that's a great way because they dry out, and you need them to get that dry skin on them for storage.
Now, I do.
Back to your question about where you find the good ones. It's a puzzle because if you go into real seed catalogs, and I would include Gaze in this, you can find out which variety of tomato you're planting, right? The seeds tell you at least that it's a beefsteak or it's a 100 or a million or whatever it is, cherry tomato. And with onions, you're not getting much kind of quality control because it says Spanish onion. That's not a variety. That's a category. So I guess some research online might reveal sources across the country where you could get onion sets that were more different or more reliable. I'd encourage everybody listening to go to seeds.ca and join Seeds of Diversity. It's free, thanks to the Bauta family that funded the membership. And there's, 1,000 other growers across Canada, and there's a catalog, and you can swap seeds with them. It's a wonderful system. I wish I knew more to answer your questions about onions. I'm thinking it's a matter of which variety you grow more than the soil or the fertilizer that determines the shape and the growth.
And Dan, like you said too, exactly. When you see them, it just says yellow onions. It doesn't give you a name or a certain type, and it's like. And so, no, they're the ones. Well, no, they're not the ones. So I do have some Spanish in to use. You get a couple of months out of Spanish, right? So I got that in now too, besides the other ones, right?
Yeah, one of the reasons I wrote the book is that our knowledge, our understanding of the whole story of the plants that we eat has been kind of dumbed down, has been kind of blenderized. And we think, oh, that's a tomato, oh, that's an onion. And there's so much more to know about the specifics and the thousands of years of plant breeding that wise women have done to create these specific varieties. There's a tomato that was developed in the United States called the mortgage lifter, because the guy who found it growing in his fields literally paid off his mortgage with this tomato. The stories behind where the plants come from and how they grow. So we need to kind of there's so much to learn. I find it really exciting. And the same thing is true for the onions you're talking about. Like, where did these come from? What kind are these? Is there a better kind for our climate? I don't know the answers to those questions. I would like to learn.
Gotcha. Well, I won't take any more of your time other than I'm watching rabbits race here now. Good gosh. And thanks for your time, and have a great day.
Yeah, happy grow season, and enjoy watching the rabbits, Bob. All right, this is The Signal. I'm Adam Walsh. It is gardening day here on the show. Dan Rubin is my guest, author of Sun, Seed, and Soil, Tips and Techniques for a Northern Garden. If you'd like to join this conversation, 709-722-7111, 1-800-563-8255, texts 709-327-8206, or you can email us, thesignal@cbc.ca. I saw some emails come in. We will be getting to those shortly, but first, let's stay on the phones. Yuvadi's calling from Glovertown. Hi.
Hello, raining.
Yes, yeah.
Yuvadi, how are
All
you?
week. I can't wait for all my flower, but I put some flower out anyway. So my question, a couple questions. The first one is, I think it's too early to ask about the tulip. This year I successful. I have many tulip, different kind, everywhere in my garden, in the front, in the back. So 2 years ago, in the fall, 2 years ago, I when they bloom, I bought about almost 100 bulbs. So after they bloom, so I dug it out and then keep them in the garage. And in the fall, I put it in the garden. So this year is so good. So should I still continue to do that, or should I keep at the ground? Because some people said we should keep it, and then they will come next spring. But I want to know when I dug it out, when I put, I know where is it. And then after they bloom, I will put something else in the bed. And the second question is in the greenhouse. So usually I go tomatoes direct in the bed, in the frame, but they had a lot like a green, like a moss. So this year I get the idea. I put in a bucket and put in the bed in the greenhouse, and then I can control more weed and allow the pot. I have some like every year I go coriander and the dog seed. So now I have a lot and many in the greenhouse, so I can use for cooking for the herb. So the question is, should I continue to put tomato in the bucket or go back to put in the bed? Okay, that's my two questions.
I do a lot of container gardening. We will soon have tomatoes and herbs and flowers growing right outside on our deck. I also do container growing of peppers and basil and cucumbers in our greenhouse. So there's nothing at all wrong with growing in the ground or in buckets, as long as you put perhaps one or at the most two tomato plants in a 5-gallon bucket. As long as the soil in the bucket is really good quality, has lots of organic matter and compost in it, and provided it has great drainage on the bottom. The drainage at the bottom is very important so the roots don't drown. But you can certainly grow in buckets in a greenhouse or in other containers, in troughs or that, or in the ground. It's just basically up to you. And going back to your question about the tulips, there are plants like, for example, dahlias, that you have to lift every winter because they won't survive. But it's interesting because we've planted a lot of tulips, a lot of daffodils, squill, other things that grow from bulbs. And we are noticing this spring that we're not getting as many back. So I think that your strategy of lifting the bulbs and storing them in a cool, dry place, like in your garage, is probably a good thing to do. We're going to have to do that with our dahlias because they won't survive. They'll turn to mush. But it sounds like with the kind of weather we've been getting in the harsh winters, that's a good strategy. I'm glad to hear about it. Every day I learn something new. So I've just learned something new about tulips.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thanks for the call, as always. And now, from Happy Valley Goose Bay, Tony Chubbs is on the line. Hey, thanks for those picks.
Oh, you're quite welcome.
How you doing?
Oh, it's all good here. It's early spring for us, of course. Snow and ice went early, so good stint of nice warm weather hitting us now, so everything's starting to come up real good.
Yeah, your rhubarb's looking great.
Yeah, just chime in on the onions there. So one of the varieties that we use is Stuttgarter.
I've heard of that.
Those are one your previous caller we're probably talking about. They're pretty flat at the bottom. They don't grow really large, but they store very well.
Is this a kind of a whiter variety, would you say?
Yeah.
Yeah,
they are yellow onion, but the flesh is really white, of course.
And they're quite sweet, right?
Yep, pretty good.
Yeah.
We've got a Spanish type too as well, but a lot of the Spanish onions, they don't have varieties to them. They're, I know the packs that we planted this year came from Bessie's, and I think they originated in Winnipeg, I believe. It's on the package, but no variety, but they're short season ones, so you pick them as they're raw.
Yeah, the phrase short season should kind of get embedded in people's brains because we live in the north, right? And even if we're not in Labrador, we're in the north here on the island. And what we're looking for are the varieties that do well. Are you growing tomatoes? What's your favorite tomato? I'm curious to know.
So we grow several. My wife is actually the connoisseur of varieties, but one that we had last year was really good. A friend of ours, Ernst Stickley, started it, and we got some from him. So it's a determinate small tomato in the cherry tomato family, I guess, and it's called Cherry Falls. Has a huge yield.
Oh,
and, almost get up to about the golf ball size in fruit. But
say the name again for us. It's
Cherry Falls.
Cherry Falls. Okay, that's good to know. Again, I've learned something new. I'm growing.
And it does good outdoors.
Go ahead.
We have them all outdoors on the patio or next to our buildings or outside the greenhouse. So they did great outdoors with little protection from the wind, and they're just perfect.
Yeah, it doesn't take much, does it, to protect plants from wind? Wind is a big factor, and if you can screen them or protect them, tent them when you need to, especially early in the growing season, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, and we grow some big beef. They take a lot longer
beef steak.
in the season, so they do okay. And a couple other varieties don't come to me right now. Red Alert is one that we frequently use.
That's a favorite. I got seeds for that one from Ross Travers years ago, and he recommended it. It's a real reliable one, the Red Alert. And here's a crazy thing that I mentioned Seeds of Diversity, and every year they put out a catalog, and in that catalog you will find more than 1,000 varieties of tomatoes. And I'll bet the ones being grown in northern Manitoba are pretty good short-season tomatoes. You know?
I'm pretty sure, actually, that the recommendation of Red Alert came from Ross Travis as well, because he was here a few years ago visiting our garden here. Just mentioned probably with peppers. We find Carmen pepper and a New Ace pepper. Really
Carmen
good
and New
pepper.
Ace, yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing is, as I'm saying this to the listeners now, that when you hear these names and you don't find them at the big box store or Gaze, and Gaze is a great source for all kinds of plant stuff, including seeds, of course. You go looking for them online, and you will find them. There's now more than 100 seed companies, including the one that I started, a little imaginary company, perfectly perennial, in Canada. And you go looking for these seeds, and you will find them, but you have to go looking for them.
Yeah. We're mostly, we do mostly Bessie's, some Stokes, and TNT is another one as well. It's pretty good. Yeah. Just final mention, just got some potatoes poking through the surface now. I think you'll find them difficult to find in Newfoundland, but they're original German type potato, and Zinglinde, I believe is the pronunciation in German for the name of the potato. You can buy them out west, but I've been propagating them now for 32 years, I guess, and the original stock came from Germany, so I'm still propagating them. They're real
what
nice.
What do they look like? Are they white-skinned, or what are they like?
Kind of, they're really light skin, but when you cook them, they're really almost like yellow color.
Yeah,
kind of
buttery flavor.
And sweet. Yeah, very good. Very thin potato, but the difficulty is they don't sprout eyes very well, so you got to take them out really early. and give them 6 or 8 weeks to sprout good.
Yeah.
And they're oblong, very smooth potatoes, so they're nice for fries or for baked potatoes too.
Yeah, I'm here I'm here Googling German potato recipes.
One of our favorite winter recipes is potato leek soup, and you steam them, the potatoes and the leeks, and then you put them through a blender, and it's a milk-based soup, really
nice.
Hearty with a bit of paprika and oregano.
Yeah.
There you go.
Great
And
stuff.
we grow Chieftain Reds too.
Yes.
The same. My friend Ern, he keeps his seed as well as I do, and we trade seed back and forth, so we keep propagating the same.
One of my
Any
big
advice? Okay,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I just asked him one piece of advice on the potato grow. I think I've heard it somewhere before. That you can either cut your seed or you can put them in whole.
Yep.
But probably better if you put them in whole to go with the larger seed, so you propagate larger potatoes.
Not necessarily getting larger potatoes, but cutting them, what you want is a piece that has several eyes on it. And when you cut them, you want to dry that edge and not leave them out for too long before you plant them. So if you cut them and you let them dry in the sun the day before and then put them in. Another really good potato technique is what's called the lazy bed method. And you plant in rows with potatoes maybe about 1.5 feet apart. And as they begin to grow, you just keep mounding the soil over them, and you cover them with seaweed and soil. And that's a traditional Newfoundland way of growing potatoes.
It's called the
lazy bed.
Sounds like a lot of work still, but yeah.
Yeah.
That's the way we grow ours. But I grow mine like that, and my friend grows his through trenching. He cuts his potatoes. I use mine whole.
Yeah, both ways work. Both ways work.
Yeah.
You're just after the eyes. That's the part that begins to sprout and grow.
Sounds good. Excellent talking to you guys.
Hey,
Good
thanks,
job.
Tony. Cheers.
Appreciate it, Adam.
Great to hear from you.
And enjoy the weather. I'm just going to, this afternoon at my desk, I'm just going to look at the gardening pictures that Tony sent, because it's the sunlight on those is fantastic.
Well, looping back to tomatoes, let me say at the 3 sites for the garden sale this Saturday, I was just up at the Autism Society, and they have a bunch of seeds that I gave them for the Vantage tomato, which is the almost lost Newfoundland greenhouse variety. Does well in warm places outdoors, medium size, very tasty tomato, Vantage. And there's a bunch of plants there ready to go. There's some Manitobas, and we'll have others up at the Mercy Center as well.
I think Ross mentioned, and I'm just trying to remember, I think it was the Roadster tomato that he mentioned before too, which is, he had great things to say about it.
Yeah.
Looking, we got a couple texts coming in here now on Gardening Day on the Signal with me, Adam Walsh, and Dan Rubin is here with me, author of Sun, Seed, and Soil, Tips and Techniques for a Northern Garden. If you still want to join the discussion, we're getting down there, but there's still some time left here in the show. 709-722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. Text us, 709-327-8206. Emails thesignal@cbc.ca. Go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to put a plug in, which is that we've really grown as an organization. I'm talking about Food Producers Forum. We have all these projects under our belt now, and we're growing fast. So we're putting out the fact that we're searching for an executive director for a full-time position starting soon. If you know somebody who's really into food security and knows the lay of the land, have them contact us, foodproducersforum@gmail.com, and we'll send out the call to them, because we're going to be in search mode now for an executive director.
Searching around. Let me see. We had a text come in. Hi, do you remove the flour of the potatoes? Why? This is Don texting from Salmon Cove.
Oh, God, a question that I can't answer. I don't know. I've heard of people doing that, and I've heard of other people saying let them grow. They actually will produce a little kind of seed pod once it flowers. The question is that pulling energy from the root and from the potatoes forming underground? I wish I could answer that decisively. I do not know the answer.
And we have a text. I'm going to ask if you. Someone just texted us. I have used the it's about bamboo and wood chipper and composting. I think there might be a typo here, either that or I'm not reading it right. I've used the bamboo like mile a minute ground in the wood chipper as compost. Is this of any value?
So we're talking about mile a minute, or also known as Japanese knotweed, which my friend Sean Dawson turns into beautiful pickles. But most of us just scream and run away because it's an invasive plant and it's huge and it's horrible and it takes over and it's very hard to get rid of. Now, the question is, can you put them through a chipper and use them for mulch? Yes, absolutely. Okay. They're not going to grow back unless you have a significant piece of stem or root. It is an invasive plant. So you don't want to be chipping large. You want to be really grinding them up. Sure.
Yeah. Here's another email. We transplanted our rhubarb early in the spring this year. It's growing well. Just wondering whether or not we should harvest it later this year or not.
Well, you can harvest it, but the main thing you need to do is feed it. And there's two main ways to feed it, or three. Fish waste, manure, and urine. It's a heavy feeder, and once it's getting established, it needs lots of nitrogen. So anything you can pile around the plant and let rot in that you're comfortable with will feed the plant, and you'll get better and better rhbarb year after year.
Yeah, perhaps some feeding's better done after dark than during the daylight hours, depending on neighbors. So. But hey,
Depends. Not in the underwear sense.
Okay.
Oh, God.
We'll plow through. I was wondering if that would come up this season, and it always does if we talk about rhubarb. Which is better, starting onion seeds or plant sets? That's from Michael. Email.
I love the questions where I can just say yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Both work, but when you're working with seed, you need to start them early indoors. Otherwise, they won't be at the stage you need them at to plant out. So what that means is that, like, I planted my sets about a week and a half ago, and if I were going to plant from seed, I would have sown that seed in a tray indoors in March to have them ready.
Yeah.
That's the only thing about that difference. They both work fine.
And how deep down should folks plant onion bulbs?
You want to plant them roughly with the top of you're talking about the sets.
I think so. There's a text just came in and just said, how deep down?
So that the top of it is about an inch below the ground at this time of year. You want some protection against frost. And then the bulbs will grow big and poke up above the soil once the onion's growing. So an inch down.
We got an update from Don about the flowers for the potatoes. Just said thanks.
Oh, good.
I've tried removing the flower. It doesn't seem to make a difference. Not totally scientific, he says, but fair enough. Hey, life is about observation here.
Well, there's a huge debate out there about whether you cut the rhubarb or pull the rhubarb. And there's people who are fierce about how you must pull the rhubarb because the rhubarb has a brain and knows it needs to grow another stem. And geez, I've not found that to be true. I cut mine. It comes back fine. So it's one of those...
Yeah, I mean, and
either or yes questions.
One of the things I appreciate for all the guests we have and the correspondence for the Gardening Day and the Gardening Show, we're going to have different opinions on things, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Right? And that's cool, because guess what? What works for one person may not work in another garden for another reason or whatever else, but it's all about having all the information out there so we can essentially choose our own gardening adventure. You know?
Well, the thing that happens on Facebook is that everybody has an opinion, and they spout off, and some are true and some are not. But the power of what we're doing with Food Producers Forum is that right across the province, there's so much knowledge at the grassroots level that when we begin to connect and agree or disagree and share that knowledge, it exponentially expands our ability to grow our own food. And that's the main resource that we're working with, is people's knowledge.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
I'm going to hit so we only have a few minutes left. I'm going to hit the pause button on gardening for a second, because I will say yesterday on the show, we asked, how do we talk about mental health and addictions? How should we talk about them? And how are we doing when it comes to talking about and acknowledging the real issue of stigma? A part of that conversation touched on men's mental health. And speaking about that, there's an event coming up. I've got Bill Jeffrey on the line with the Lonely Man Project. How you doing? Oh, hi, Bill.
Hi there.
Hey, there you are. I couldn't hear you for a second. So, first of all, remind folks briefly about the Lonely Man Project.
The Lonely Man Project is an effort to raise awareness of men's mental health and the impact it has on men, families, all of us in the province, including the suicide rate, but not limited to the suicide rate. There's a lot of families that are suffering right now with men's mental health issues, men that are not seeking help, men who don't know where to go for help or might not recognize what's happening to them. And, families, wives, partners, kids, everybody's suffering with this right now. And, our suicide rate certainly is indicative of that.
There's an event coming up. I'm going to be there. You're going to be there. Tell us about it.
This event, we're really excited about this event. This is our first, it's actually the provincial first. An evening of men's mental health is the first time we put a spotlight on men's mental health in the province. We're hosting that at the CLB Armory on Thursday, June the 13th. It's going to be a fantastic event. We've got a sit-down dinner. They do a great job with the meal there, stuffed chicken breast. It's going to be fantastic. We've got Dr. Robert Whitley, who's a foremost expert on men's mental health. He's actually written a book on issues with men and boys. He's got about 150 papers out there. He's coming down to tell us what's happening, to explain it, more detail than what I've been able to do for sure, and answer some questions if we have those. So I certainly encourage anybody who works with men, who, if your industry is predominantly men, if you're concerned about a brother or father, or an uncle, a son, I certainly encourage everybody to come out and hear Dr. Whitley speak. You're not going to get the opportunity very often for him to be down here. It's one of those things right now, Adam, where a lot of people are hoping that it never affects them. But it's affecting a lot of people, and it's going to affect a lot of people going forward. And prevention is a lot of this, and we're not doing enough in the prevention side. So don't assume it's not going to affect you. Or someone you love, or one of your kids, or whatnot. Come out and hear Dr. Whitley speak. We've also got Dave D'Entremont from the Breton Group. He's going to be speaking, from a CEO perspective on unraveling. I've got Audrey Wade. She's going to be speaking from a mother's perspective. Audrey lost her son to suicide. He was 19 a few years ago, and she's going to be talking from that aspect, how this impacts women. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Lonely Man Project. You got the guitar. I'm going to play the Lonely Man song there in an acoustic version.
There you go.
I got a captive audience, so it'll be nice. We also have a silent auction, and we've had great support for the silent auction. I got to say, I can't thank everybody enough. Churchill Park Music Festival gave us a pair of the sold-out Nickelback tickets. George Street Festival has given us a double pass for any night on George Street.
Yes,
we've had a place like Johnny Ruth from downtown, a boutique that's given us an assortment of goods that we're really happy about. And Newfoundland Distillery came up with a couple of bottles, a donation for the silent auction. So it's going to be a very diverse silent auction. It's going to be a great time. But I really encourage anybody who's interested in men's mental health to come out. Like I said, don't assume it's not going to affect you, or that it's not currently affecting you, because as I always say, men put on masks long before COVID ever existed.
There you go.
And if they want to have more information, they can certainly find it at lonelyman.ca. And you can check out my website. I do counseling for men. It's at BillJeffrey.com.
All right, Bill. I'll be seeing you there. I'll be seeing you later this week, too, to chat about the event. I appreciate you coming on the show just for that chat as a follow-up to yesterday's show on mental health. Much appreciated, and see you soon, buddy.
And Adam, thanks so much for hosting this. It's fantastic that you're going to do this for us. I know you're passionate about it, too, but there is a stigma even to be involved in events like this, which we'll talk a bit more at the event. So I'm really, really happy that you're on board with us. We can't thank you enough.
All right. Well, happy to do it. Be well, my friend, and I'll see you soon.
We'll see you soon. Take care. Thank you.
All right. Follow up to yesterday's show. On pause, back to gardening. One last question to fit in here.
Good stuff.
Yeah. No. It's nice to follow through on things with conversations from one show to another. Last question for the day. Let me see. We got 1 minute here. I have tulips growing and flowering well. However, there's quite a bit of greenery with no flower. Will these ever bloom, or should I just dig them up? That's from Patricia in Bay Roberts.
We've got a few tulips that don't seem to be coming along in terms of flowering, too. Generally, it's a matter of adding the phosphorus that boosts flowering. But I would be patient with them because of the weather.
Yeah.
And do we mention the weather? And oh, by the way, the weather. Because everything's kind of slowed down. And until it warms up, there may be plants still waiting to bloom.
And last question. What's the best thing to start growing for absolute beginners?
Oh, I would say that your salad greens, because they grow so easily and they grow so quickly. There's nothing like a fresh radish if you've never grown one. But you could try just about anything, but just good soil, protection from wind and weather, those are the keys.
There you go. Excellent. Thanks for this again. It's nice hanging out in the fog. I think we're still at CBC, right? I don't even know where we are when I look outside.
Yeah. Thank you, Adam.
All right, Dan Rubin there. And folks, anytime you want to get in touch with the show, the signal at cbc.ca, or call the signal line and leave a message, 709-576-5260. Coming up tomorrow on the show, what do you want to feel when you look at your photos? Project Powerback wants to help folks who are queer, trans, or have an otherwise underrepresented body or identity and want their photo taken. We will speak with folks about why this kind of project is so meaningful. That's tomorrow. Until then, thanks for listening.